9 attempts to conquer the city of Kazan, 9 small churches. And the last attack that turned out to become successful took place on the day of Intercession, one of the religious festivals. Intercession means Mary's protection, the protection of Mother of God. We celebrate it every October. So the biggest church that is in the middle was consecrated to intercession. That is why the official name is still is the Church of Intercession. In the medieval times, the Church of Intercession on the moat. But it so happened that there lived a man in Moscow whose name was Basil. A typical Russian name, the Russian pronunciation is Vasily. Probably some of you has that name, who knows. And at first, Basil was an ordinary person. He had a boot shop. He made boots even for the royal family. He had a successful business. But at night, he had dreams of different characters. He saw fires consuming the city. They really happened. And once a servant brought him a pair of boots, asking Basil, please get them repaired as soon as possible because my master would need them next morning. And when Basil took that pair of boots, he suddenly said, your master won't need them next morning. Next morning he would die. It really happened. And after that, Basil abandoned his home and his life changed. He started to live in streets of this city. He started to profit. He predicted a big fire that destroyed Moscow in 1547. He predicted the death of Ivan the Terrible. And he told people who would be the next Russian Tsar. So he was a prophet when he died. He was buried near the Church of Intercession. And people built another church above his grave. They started coming to his grave to pay homage, pay respect. They started telling each other, let's go to St. Basil. In this way, it got the second name, and today everybody knows the St. Basil's, but just few people remember that the original name is different. Fortunately, during Soviet times, it wasn't demolished, but there was a moment when some of the Stalin's advisors decided to demolish it, to give way to military hardware, to tanks and missiles, because Stalin started military parades in Red Square. A little bit later, when we will be going further on, we will see some constructions that were destroyed by Stalin for the same reason, to give way to tanks and missiles. But fortunately, one of the Russian architects locked himself inside, saying that he was ready to die with the church. It stopped Stalin, but the architect was exiled to Siberia. But fortunately he survived, was back after the death of Stalin. Stalin died in 1953, and immediately very many innocent people who had been perished during Stalin's purges had been sent to labor camps. They started to come back. Officially, Stalin perished 11 million in labor camps, just for nothing. Everybody who, those people who had high education, who understood that Stalin was a tyrant. So we have seen some old construction in this square. And by the way, this tower has a different name. People call it the clock tower, because the clock shows the Moscow time, that is the official time throughout the country, that has 9 time zones. The diameter of the face is 6 meters. The weight of the clock mechanism is 23 tons. Wind up twice a day, manually, in keeping with the old traditions. Designed and made by 2 Englishmen, English mechanics, the Butenov's brothers. Red Square is a kind of international place in terms of architecture. And by the way, the Kremlin's wall and towers were built by Italians. They were invited by Ivan the Great, Ivan the Third, and to be exact, his wife, who was born in Constantinople, lived in Rome, was familiar with the Renaissance culture, invited Italians. But it's a different story. From this position we can see also the monument to the 2 Russian heroes who liberated Russia from Poles and Lithuanian people. In 1612, history is history. In Russia there were 2 royal families, two dynasties. Everybody knows the Romanovs. The last royal family, they were in power for 300 years. But the first dynasty, the Rurik's dynasty, was in power for 700 years, since the 9th up till the end of the 16th century. And Ivan the Terrible was the last powerful representative of that dynasty. After his death, there were two more rulers, and then the time of trouble started. The period of 15 years in between of the two dynasties is known in the Russian history like the time of trouble. Russia was a weak country. Polish-Lithuanian kingdom was the most powerful in Europe. Several times, Polish troops came to Moscow, to Russia. The last invasion took place in the year of 1610, 1612. During 2 years, Poles lived everywhere. The Kremlin was taken over, the Russian throne was taken over by a Polish impostor for the throne. There was a moment of desperation. People thought that everything was lost. The motherland had been lost to Poles. But the liberation came from the town of Nizhny Novgorod, pretty big town. It is located far away from here on the Volga River. Two people who lived there, the monument to them we can see right here. One of them was a noble person, the other one was a military man. They managed to collect the army, irregular army. Volunteers raised up money to equip the army. They brought the army here to Moscow to drive out Poles. They succeeded. But during the decisive assault onto the Kremlin, one of them, the person who is sculptured sitting, was wounded. He gave a promise. In case of the success, he would build a church. And he kept the promise. And we are going to see that church. Let's follow me.